Welcome, PewterCast listeners. This is entry 8 to Training Camp Journals with Ren. Of course, I'm your host, Ren Daxt, flying solo again because the co-host and creator of the PewterCast, Brent Allen, he has left the Bay Area and he's back at home in Jacksonville. I guess the high point of today was I had a very interesting conversation with a bunch of the heavy hitters of the Bucs media. I just sort of lucked into it. I went up into the stands, and the next thing I knew, there was 3 or 4 of them, my general vicinity, and they started talking about the Hall of Fame and how that process is going and how things are going. They feel things are going to change, and what they saw and some of the things that were sort of wrong with the induction process. But I'm going to save that till a little later, and I'll start off as I always do with first observations. The indoor facility is humming along. I mean, the sides, one side's up, next side's up, the roof is coming along. So, like I reported earlier, it might, the shell or the skin might be on, but no, that's probably pushing it now that I saw it today. The shell will definitely be on by the second preseason game. So that's how that's going. First people out, as always, I like to report on that. Fitzpatrick, and he was, it was the 2 Ryans. He was joined by Ryan Griffin. A little bit of a lighter crowd today, which was sort of expected. It's a work day. It wasn't stick carrier invasion. But as far as the cheers and the chants went, I would say that the crowd was into it more than any other crowd, of course, besides, stick carrier day. But I would have to believe that's a direct correlation from Saturday. I believe probably 99.5% of those people in the stands have seen those videos that were out, and how much energy and fandom they brought to the Bucs training camp practice, and it sort of it sort of washed over them, and they felt it was okay. I'm not sure that's the right word, but the energy that they brought sort of carried over to today in the crowd. By no means am I trying to say that today's crowd was anywhere near, the hype that the stick carriers brought on Saturday, but it was still good to see. It was definitely louder than any of the other days besides that Saturday. The weather was good. The sun would go behind the clouds for 5 or 10 minutes and pop out for 5 or 10 minutes. So when it was out, it was warm. It wasn't terribly hot, but that cloud cover really felt nice. Anytime there was a cloud cover, that's when I would sort of scoot down to the front and try to get a video, because when the sun's out, it sort of eats up the shoot area where the media guys take their pictures and videos, and the first couple rows of the stands. Last thing, the rest were in attendance. They're out there calling penalties. There were a few penalties on the 11-on-11s, a few on the 7-on-7s. I would probably say 3 or 4 between the 2 of them. But there were a lot more during the individual drills. Sort of like the wide receivers would be on the outside going to D-backs one-on-one, and they'd throw like a jump ball or something like that, which I thought was a really good drill to have the refs there, for push-off defensive pass interference, offensive pass interference, that type of deal. But during the drills is probably where I saw the most flags. But it was cool to have them out there and sort of see what was going on. I mean, they were calling everything, because there was actually a delay of game at one point. Was called on the offense during the 11-on-11s. So let's go ahead and, speaking of offense, let's go ahead and start talking about what I saw there. Bobo Wilson, he looked quick today, in and out of his breaks and the drills. He just looks a little faster than everybody. His feet were chopping a little quicker when he was slowing down to get in and out of his breaks and things like that. He had a good day on Saturday, and it looked like he was sort of feeling it, like he's got a little more confidence and trusting his ability to be able to be with the team. So he looked good out there today, but so did Walker look good as well today. I think, to me, it's such a close race, because you have Huff, Martino, and Reedy, who've been in the system and know it's better than Wilson and Walker do. but I think Wilson and Walker they look a little quicker, look a little faster. Seems like they're not dropping easy balls, and they're coming up with big catches. So for that last spot, it's your guess is as good as mine right now. So they started out 11 on 11s, but they started with a 50-second clock, no timeouts, and about 60 to 65 yards away, and they ran all three teams out there. First team with Winston's quarterback, obviously. There's a delay game right off the bat. So now it's like 1st and 15 and no times run off the clock. But he threw a pass to Evans, who caught it for a first down. Then he had another sideline throw to Brate, but it was a little high, and the ball, he caught the ball, but the pass itself pulled Brate out of bounds. So that was an incompletion. And then the third, Godwin, I'm sure you've seen it on social media by now, sort of did a stutter step. Some people call it double move, some people don't. But the point is, he broke down like he was going to cut the route off and then sprinted by the cornerback. And that was probably a nice 35, 40-yard bomb with nobody around him, and Godwin, just circled under it and caught it right in the middle of the end zone, 5 yards deep in the end zone. So Winston, 3 plays, boom, 60 yards, no timeouts. Fitz came in. He was running with the twos today. He had a short pass to O.J. Howard. Then he went underneath to Huff. And then he threw one high to Godwin. And now it's 4th down, but he got a pass to Cross. Another short pass. He was sort of dinking, dunking. It wasn't pushing the ball down the field. But now sort of time's against him, but he did get a first down. Had another check down to Quiz. Then he threw a pretty bad pass to Martino. Then he found OJ short again. Like I said, he really wasn't. He was checking down, just sort of methodically getting it down the field. So now it's 3rd down with 14 seconds left. There was a pass across the middle, which was pretty deep. It was behind Reedy, but he made a nice adjustment, came down with the ball, sort of around the 5-yard line, maybe just outside, maybe just inside, and they ran up there and tried to spike the ball, but they didn't. They ran out of time. So if that would have been a game time situation, it would have been game would have been over, and the Bucs would have had a first down on the 4-yard line. Then Ryan Griffin came in. He had a swing pass to Auclair, and this whole thing turned into like a big cluster really quickly. Before he went out of bounds, it looked like the ball was stripped and did not go out of bounds, but the refs were there, and it was a little lackadaisical for the refs. They were calling penalties, but you didn't hear like a lot of whistles and trying to stop plays. The ball was laying there, and I believe it was Elliott. He scooped it up, and or maybe I think it was McLean. I'm sorry. He scooped it up and starts running back to the end zone, returning it because it was a fumble. But everybody else treated it like it was either a drop pass or a fumble out of bounds. So McLean's down like the far 10-yard line, walking back, and everyone else has lined up again. And Griff hikes the ball, and they throw a penalty, and it's like offsides defense. But he was offsides by like 40 yards. So that whole thing was just a little goofy, but it worked out in the offensive favor. Then Griff threw some couple of nice passes in a row. He threw this bullet to Walker towards the stands on the sideline. Elliott saw it the last second and sort of peeled off his guy. He was covering in the flat and tried to get his hand in there, but Griffin zipped it in there, and Walker caught it, fell out of bounds. And then the very next play, same tight coverage, same side of the field, another small window. Griffin got it in there. Walker caught it and got out of bounds, and there was like 3 seconds left, so they line it for a pretty short field goal, probably 25, 30 yards, something like that. And it was towards the skinny post, and Aguayo and Folk nailed him. One of the few kicks they both made, or made at all today. I'll get that to a little later. They're sort of focusing Reedy today. There's lots of passes to Reedy. He ran sort of like a reverse. You can call it a reverse or a jet sweep, whoever you want to call it. But I mentioned on Saturday it looked like they were feeding the ball to Huff. because he did that jet sweep, and they threw a lot of balls his way during the 7-on-7s and 11s-on-11s, and it looked like today was Reedy's day. So he got the jet sweep twice and had a lot of balls thrown his way. Something interesting, McWeapon, the rookie Jerry McNichols out of Boise State, was running with the twos. So he was running with Ryan Fitzpatrick's team as the main back. He looked good. Had some nice vision and found a hole. Had some patience later. Found a hole in a drill. He did a double move on Quan and got a deep ball thrown to him, and he caught it. So McNichols had a good day, and it looks like they're trying him out against a little tougher competition to see where he's at. Most, if not all camp, but I would probably say all camp, he running with the threes and the fours, and today they put him up the twos, and he looked just as good as he had. It's still very difficult on running plays, and it was sort of a run-heavy 11-on-11s today, to be honest. There wasn't a lot of highlights that way because they're still not tackling to the ground. They're just doing the pro pop or the pro thump. If you hit the guy at the shoulder square, you're sort of down type of deal. So, but it was good to see McWeapon, as I'm calling him, hashtag McWeapon in there. And, it didn't, look just as good against the twos as he did with everybody else. You sort of see they were doing on 7-on-7s, and Jameis is picking them apart. There's no pass rush, there's no offensive lineman, no defensive lineman, so he can pretty much sit back there as long as he wants. And he wasn't taking a lot of chances today. It looked like he was really concentrating on making the smart throw, and it was just, I don't want to say it was boring to watch, but it looked very easy for him. There was always somebody he could find that was, wide open. Normally it was a check down, but the check downs are still getting like 12, 10, 12, 15 yards, sort of in that range. So it's sort of hard to call it a check down, but after watching that drill, I sort of thought to myself, I go, okay, well, maybe that's why he tries to squeeze things into the windows, on 7-on-7s and 11s-on-11s, because the short stuff or the right play or the game management play, he's already got that stuff down. It would look pretty simple for him. But the quarterbacks overall really didn't have a good day. So, don't get me wrong, like they ate them up. They looked good early, and then it just, by the end of the day, you were like, okay, I'm sort of ready to end this. There are, I don't want to say a handful of picks. There's 2 or 3 picks today. Some of them were good plays on the defenders, and some of them were, just a bad throw. I did see this formation, which I was very excited about. I saw Brate and Howard line up as tight ends and Stocker in the backfield as a lead back or a fullback. So they had a sort of like a 3 tight end set in there, and they faked the pitch to Martin on the side that Howard started on, and he chipped and then drug all the way across the field, sort of get lost in the wash because the whole entire play was going right. Jameis spun out of it, and they did have, I guess, cloud or bracket coverage. There was a guy underneath, there was a guy on top of Howard, but Jameis laid it in there. Howard didn't come up with it. It would have had to been a good catch. It wouldn't have been like an impossible catch, but it would have had to been a good catch. But it was sort of cool to see those 3 guys on the field. It's the first time I noticed it all training camp that they had those, arguably their top 3 tight ends. Of course, Howard and Brate are, but who you could, I guess after right now, you really can't argue Stocker's not 3. At least in overall knowledge and dependability or being reliable or being the most consistent. I'll put Cross behind him, and then Auclair and Westbrook, wherever you kind of want to stick those guys. They're sort of up and down every single day. They need to get more consistent. The tight end, which we thought was going to be a tough cut, if I had to do it now, it would be just the same 4 as was. No, that's a lie, because Myers isn't here. But the top 3 from last year plus Howard. So it would be Howard, Brate, Stocker, and Cross. But I'm not the evaluator. I don't really know exactly what's going on the field. I don't get to see every rep, and I'm not in the classroom. So take that for what it's worth. And then to sort of round out the offense, I guess it was almost the last play of the day. Griffith threw this deep ball. Griffin threw this deep ball to Godwin, and safety came. I don't want to say safety came over late because the time the ball landed in his hands, they were both there. So it was double coverage, and once again, Godwin's body control. He was sort of boxing out the cornerback as he was going up to get the ball at his high point. The more I watch him on those sort of contested balls, I think he's like a late tipper. And what I mean by that is, he doesn't put his hands up to catch the ball too soon. So if the defender's back is to the ball, which usually is on deep passes, probably 99, 95%, 98% of the time, one of the clues is they look for is when the receiver starts to put their hands up and their eyes get big, that means the ball's like almost there. But Godwin seems to jump and sort of box everybody out and then put his hands up. So he doesn't give the defensive back a lot of time to react or recover or get set to, the ball's there, because by the time he's moving and the clues that the defensive back would be seeing, he's already making the catch. So that's sort of the next little evolution. I don't want to say next evolution that he's doing, but the next evolution that I'm seeing, that, how is this guy always making the catch? How is he always open? How is he always getting these 50-50 balls, these contested routes, these contested catches? And so that's what I'm coming up with. That's what I came up with today. I'm going to keep looking at it to make sure that theory sort of plays out. But as of right now, that's what I'm going with, and I like it. All right, that brings us to the defense. One of the coolest things I saw today was they're rolling out all four safeties. All through camp so far, it has been Conti and Tandy lining up, and then with the second team, they would bring in Wilcox and Evans. And Wilcox was playing some nickel as well, so sometimes you see Conti, Tandy, and Wilcox on the field at the same time, either a 3-safety look or a 2-safety look with a really big nickel corner. But today they were mixing, matching. So you saw Evans on with Conti, you saw Evans on with Tandy, you saw Tandy on with Conti, you saw Tandy on with Wilcox, you saw Wilcox on with Conti. So any two of those four were running with the ones at different times. Evans didn't flash as far as a pass breakup that I saw or an interception, but it seems like he's still holding his own. We've talked about how the ball is finding Wilcox a lot, and it did again today. Had another big day at camp, as far as flashing, I should say. I had a real nice breakup against O.J. Howard. O.J. caught the ball, and Wilcox sort of reached in between his arms and knocked it out before they came to the ground. It would have probably been that would probably have been replayed, and how many feet were down if it was a football move, blah 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 blah. But still, it was a nice catch by O.J. and a nice play by Wilcox. But those four players were all playing in certain variations of twos, as in two safeties, with the ones today. So probably look for that to go forward. Brent Grimes also had another great day. Jackson got by him, Deshaun Jackson got by him. It was a little bit underthrown, but definitely, a catchable ball, and Grimes closed the gap at the end and knocked it away. Once again, kind of sound like a broken record, but watching him and Mike Evans go at it day after day after day is really fun to watch. The old iron sharpens iron mantra there. One time, Robert Ayers being Robert Ayers, one time the defense called a timeout. It was during, like a 11-on-11 drill, and they didn't get the communication right, or maybe they had the wrong personnel in, or some people were a little confused on where they were lining up, but they had to call a timeout, and Robert Ayers did not like it. He was not happy at all. He turned around immediately and was pointing, and you could see his head bobbing up and down. He was fired up. I don't know exactly who he was yelling at or what he was unhappy about, but I'm sure it was along the lines of kind of what I said about, you have to be able to line up in the right spot. You have to make the calls. Like could have been like a come on, man. Let's you can't act like that if you kind of want to make this team, or you got to make those calls, or you can't do those type of things with this, on this defense. You're costing us yards. Something in that realm is what I would guess what he was saying. But it was just classic Robert Ayers to me from what I know about him. Something from the Mike Smith press conference that I heard, which I thought was really interesting. They're going to be rotating their defensive linemen even more this year. Jay Hayes rotates his defensive line a lot. It's sort of the, I don't want to say in vogue, but it's the way that the NFL is sort of going, where you have the pass rush specialist, run stopping specialist, and you have, if you're lucky enough, you have all around players, like Gerald McCoy or Aaron Donald, that can do both. But they said they looked at snap counts last year. This is Mike Smith in the press conference saying this, and they're going to even do more rotations, sort of balance them out. I don't know if this is sort of like the beginning of the year thing to keep them fresh for the end of the year, or beginning of the game thing to keep them fresh for the fourth quarter, because it's sort of like a double-edged sword. Yeah, you want Gerald McCoy, to be nice and fresh for the fourth quarter and second half of the season, but really, sitting him on, he can't make plays while he's sitting on the bench. So if he's getting less plays per game, is that really helping your defense? But nonetheless, there's going to be more defensive line rotation. And Mike Smith said the biggest battle out there is nickel. As far as his defense, he said right now, the one, I guess, most up in the air and has the most people involved is the nickel slot, which would be like Wilcox, Elliott, McLean, and Jude. All those guys are going at it head-to-head. And so... yeah, besides the outside corners with Hargraves and Grimes, it seems like those other three DB positions, safeties and nickel, those are just sort of up for grabs for anyone. And Wilcox seems to be the only one sort of double-dipping in that sort of thing. So as a guy that was in the building when Deshaun Jackson and Chris Baker had their press conferences, welcoming as a Buccaneer with Jason Light and Dirk Cutter. Like, Wilcox was in the building. He had sort of did a short interview with Casey sort of in the hallway, and then later out during her Bucs beat out on the field. So I don't think it was a day one signing. He was like a day two signing. But by the time, Jackson and Baker got to $1 for their presser, Wilcox had already signed, and so he was there too, but he didn't get all the hubbub, no press conference and all that type of thing in the auditorium room. But he's been good. He's been real good. He's been a very pleasant surprise, because a lot of people argued that he sort of lost his starting job at Dallas. Some people say they ran a three-headed monster, a three-headed safety, as they rotated those three guys in, and then some people say that he lost his starting position, and the only reason he sort of got rotated back in was because somebody got hurt, and they were sort of, as I was saying with the defensive line, they wanted to play him, but they knew they couldn't play him the whole entire game, player X at safety, so Wilcox was sort of spelling him, for a couple series per game to sort of keep him fresh and try not to injure whatever the injury was further. But either way, he's been a real pleasant surprise. So that moves us on to special teams. Special teams, as you probably know, the kickers look terrible today. I think I saw someone say they're 2 for 7. I sit at the top row in the stands, so it's very hard to see if the kick actually makes it, because it's usually too high up the goalpost. I could probably only see it like 1/3 of the way up the goalpost, and the top 2/3 are, I can't see where they are. And if the refs who were there today, and they didn't do it all the time, or, I'm going to start calling them practice assistants. The guys that, move the cones and grab the bag full of balls and drag them around and shag balls and stuff like that. The practice assistants, sometimes they say it's good, but I think they only do that when it's close. Like if you really, if the coaches, they're doing it for the coaches, they're not doing it for the stands. So, they don't stick their hands way up, they just kind of like, Australian rules football, sort of like, right at the waist, they just kind of put their hands real quick like good, or wave them like no good. But that's only if it's close. If it's dead on or it's short, or just over, they'll be good. Or if it's sort of like right or left and sneaks in, or just goes a little bit wide, they're like up or down. But if it's right down the middle where everybody can see it, they don't do any. They don't raise their hands or say yes, no, good, safe, out. That's not true. But since I can only see the bottom third of the goalposts, I don't know. I don't know if it missed wildly or it was good. But I did see a count out there that they both went like 2 for 7 today, and that seemed about right. They were not good. I know Aguayo was upright, I think, 2 times today. He doinked it. And then Brian Anger, God, midseason form. He was sitting back, I guess, on the other 40, just across midfield, and they were doing gunner drills where the punt returner would let it bounce on purpose. He would call a fair catch inside the 10 and just let it bounce and try to go in. And, Anger hit it inside between like the 8 and the 3 just every single time. Just boom, 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 boom. Never kicked it in the end zone. And I don't think I ever saw him kick it outside of the 10. So within that little 5-yard range between the 8 and the 3-yard line, just time after time after time after time. So, he's looking like he's picking up right where he left off last season. So expect another good season from him from what I've seen. This is sort of round out everything else. Some things that I saw that I want to pass on to you or heard. Dirk Cutter said in his press conference that Fitzgerald and Griff, the 2 Ryans, are both going to get time with the 2s and the 3s in the Cincinnati game. So all the 1s are going to play together, and they're not going to play long. And then when they come out, whoever comes in next will be running with the 2s, and then say it's Fitzpatrick will run with the 2s and Griffin runs with the 3s, but then later on in the game, Fitzpatrick will be running with the 3s, and that will give Griff some time to run with the 2s. So they're going to equal time for, I guess, the 2s and the 3s for those guys, which is something I always wanted to see, was Griffin get to run with the 1s/2s, because you really don't know anything about him because we only see him in preseason. But preseason games, he's running with the 3s/4s because Glennon was running with the 2s/3s or the 1s/2s. So it was, and it's true that most of the time Griffin was going up against 3/4s defensively, but it would just be nice to see him get to play with sort of like a little higher caliber of talent around him as a whole before you really start to get an evaluation. Of course, the coaches, scouts, they have a much better feeling about where he is than we do as fans. But it's just going to be good to see for me. And this could have just been a slip up, but I found it a little interesting. At the end, one of the reporters asked something about like who's in the lead for the 5th wide receiver spot or the last wide receiver spots. And, he said Godwin's always looked good, and then he named off a couple other people, just about every other wide receiver there is. And then at the end he goes, yeah, so it's going to be a real tough battle for those last couple of spots, as in plural. Now, does that mean that they have it in their head right now they're going to keep wide receiver 5 and 6? Because Godwin's going to make the team, let's face it. Would you really put him in that conversation? So if he's the 4th wide receiver, is Cutter saying that the last couple of spots are 5 and 6? Or was he adding Godwin to the conversation and just sort of, not giving the rookie, like, oh, he's already on the team, so there's only one spot left. So I think it was sort of a misspeak, which I've heard that's not actual word. But, you never know. So it was just something I picked up on. I'm like, what? Are we going with 6 as of right now? So, like I said, we'll see. There was a couple of injuries today. VH3 was limping off. Vernon Hargraves was limping off. But he was back on the field within a couple plays, and he looks fine. Ali was slow to get up at one point. It looked like an ankle injury, lower leg, I guess. But he stayed in. He did one more rep, and then the twos came in. This was like 11 on 11s. But at the end of practice, he came over and signed for about 5-10 minutes. And then when he was walking back across the field, he had a little bit of a limp. It was noticeable. It wasn't terrible as in, we're going to have to leave this guy behind or the enemy's going to track, just overtake us and kill us. Sorry, buddy. You're slowing us down. We're all going to die. But you could tell that it was a little sore. It was after practice. His body was starting to cool down and everything was starting to tighten back up. And so we'll see tomorrow. He might get a quote unquote body healing day. But I don't think there's anything, you don't have to be scared about it right now. But the good thing is, he didn't hurt his ukulele hands. So if you haven't seen that yet, I sort of stumbled upon it early last night. I shouldn't say early as in early last night, but early as in when it was posted. Donovan Smith on his Instagram page, it's him and Ali, and he's singing and Ali's playing the ukulele, and they're laying in their beds at the training camp hotel, and Ali's playing the ukulele and Donovan's singing. I really don't know the song, but you'll recognize it. Everybody recognizes it. I'm sure people are like, you don't know the name of that song? Sorry. But you should watch that video. It's really hilarious, and that's why I'm referencing, at least Ali didn't hurt his ukulele hands. But I saw today that now Ali's, I guess, Instagrammed it out. I don't know, he shared on his Instagram, and actually the Buccaneers have shared it on their Instagram as well. And I think I checked around noon today, and it's up to probably 10, 12,000 views. And when I found it last night, it was like 100, 110, something like that. So I probably should have saved that one for last for the extras. Here's a few things. Ryan Griffin is not leaving Jameis Winston's side. Anytime there's downtime, he's right there with him. Sort of, if Jameis is doing something, Ryan Griffin's helping him do it. And I just started thinking to myself that, these leadership skills that Griffin's picking up are almost, they're almost unteachable unless you're around a guy like Winston, sitting in a classroom and having your QB coach, or even taking it further, going to a leadership seminar. These are just lectures, and maybe you might see a video or two, but I'm sure there's lots of graphs and information and numbers and tell you this is why you do this. This makes you a leader. But to be able to spend day in, day out with someone like Winston is probably the things that Ryan Griffin, if he ever does move on, these are things that his next team, if he does move on, are going to be like really happy they got this guy because he's learning how to do it the right way, and he's smart enough to realize that this is the right way to do it, and he's just attached to Jameis Winston's hip, and it's just cool to see. It was just something that I thought about, and even later in life, who knows? Shelton Quarles was on what's that? Bucs Insider Live, and something I thought he said was interesting is he thinks with the new CBA, the newest CBA, the ones they have now, has taken down. When there's no more two-a-days, he thinks it's really hurting player development. And the reason he thought that, there's no more two-a-days, he thought when that CBA was being made, that some of the veteran players then wanted sort of to hang on a little longer, like get, stretch out maybe 1 or 2 more years on their career. So they put in rules where they didn't have to practice as much or practice as hard. So it would be harder. So it would be not as much wear and tear on their body, and they could squeeze, another year, another 2 years possibly out of their career, which I thought was, I thought it made a lot of sense. I find it incredibly short-sighted and selfish, but I can't really argue with it. I wasn't there, but it's it makes sense. And so maybe, and I'm not trying to pass blame like, oh, damn you veterans from, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, whenever the last CBA bargaining agreement was formed, you're ruining the depth of football. But everything you said sort of makes sense to me, and I can't really disagree. They're not getting enough practice time to develop their, second and third string players. They're not getting enough reps, and in the long run, that's going to hurt the league. And finally, with the extras, I just want to finish up with Jeff. He was a kid in the U.S. Army, is sitting in front of me, and he was showed me this picture of him and Adam Humphries after the Seattle game, where Humphries was holding up his uniform, I guess Jeff's uniform, I don't want to call it jersey, but his jacket, his U.S. Army jacket, and Jeff was holding up Hump's game-worn jersey, and he'd brought it with him, today to practice to get it signed by Hump. And the difference between a game-worn, like an actual Buccaneers jersey, and even like the most expensive jersey you can find, like this is an authentic NFL jersey. It's not. Like, they're totally different. Like, Adam Humphries has no sleeves on it. It's got like the tight cuffs on there. There's like places where it's super breathable. There's places where it looks like there's almost like padding or insulation up there to soak up the sweat and disperse it and cool you down. I mean, the difference between, you see somebody in an expensive NFL game, authentic jersey, and you can tell that one, from the silkscreen one that they got, at Brand X store, but then you put that one, the officially licensed NFL jersey one against an actual game-worn NFL jersey, the difference is just as big night and day as it is from, the silkscreen one to the very expensive one. But he brought there to get Adam to sign it. I just wanted to give him a shout out. I hope he got it signed for him. And, so that's all about that. And finally, I wanted to get to that Hall of Fame talk I sort of opened the show with, where, the Bucs media guys that cover them every single day, the subject sort of came up about how they think that change is coming in the way that it's being inducted, or the induction process is going on. They feel like there's sort of like an old guard out there, and there might even be sort of like a power group. They sort of mentioned the northeastern area guys. Doesn't matter if they're like AFC or NFC, but like all the New England area, northeastern Philly, New England, the New Yorks, like all those guys, the old school, the Keystone States, original 13 colonies, if you want to. Those guys are sort of, ruling the roost. And it's sort of what they say, who they want to get in. And then some great points were brought up where, like, one of the media members, admitted, like, I can tell you a little bit about the NFC South, but I can't tell you anything about the AFC West. I know a couple of players because, but every fan knows those players, and it's basically because it's not my job. And they were saying, these guys that are voting never saw the players they're voting on play. They're just going on by reputation or a 5-minute presentation, which is sort of, ridiculous. It's antiquated. It's old. It's not. The process does not work anymore for what it is. I could see back in the day before social media, and be able to watch every game, with these NFL passes and things like that, where the newspaper guys were the most informed. They were the best way because you couldn't see every game. A lot of the games were on the TV back then. So they're the ones that got to travel around, got to see other stadiums, got to talk to the other players. So who else is, there's no one else in the United States that got to see as much as they did. But now, one of the media members even brought up, like, guys have retired. Like, they've had newspaper jobs. Say they've had the Hall of Fame vote for, they've had the Hall of Fame vote for like 10, 15 years, and then they retire from their newspaper, and now they don't even work anymore, but they don't want to give up their Hall of Fame vote. It's, they feel like it's tenured. they're not covering a team anymore. They're not working anymore, but they're still showing up, once a year at the owners' meeting and doing these Hall of Fame votes. So they think something's coming down the line. There was a little change this year where they let some players in, Dan Fouts and James Lofton in there, and they actually they got a vote, from what I understand. I overheard this little hot news that both those guys, Fouts and Lofton, actually, were pro-Lynch. They voted for Lynch, and sort of the northeastern. That's where Lynch keeps stumbling. Like these guys up in the Northeast, the Peter Kings, and like I said, the guys that cover the Patriots. And I'm not calling anyone out. This is all sort of this is secondhand. This is hearsay. I heard it from this guy, who heard it from that guy, who heard it from that guy. So this is this is like the telephone game. This is the fourth, fifth time this message has been sent down. So, but I just thought it was a really good conversation. And it seems like this I don't know, storyline is really starting to get some traction where these guys are so entrenched, and people are starting to be like, well, why isn't Terrell Owens in the Hall of Fame? It doesn't. I don't care if you don't like him. It's not. It's not the I'm nice to the media and I had good numbers Hall of Fame. It's the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So it seems like there's a lot of politicking and like maybe even to the point of like you vote for my guy, I vote for your guy type of thing, or like we all stick together. We won't get that guy in because we're all going to stick together and get this guy in. Maybe something that John Lynch ran into this year with the Dawkins. Him and Dawkins both being safeties and going in, but Dawkins just didn't get enough votes from the rest of the Hall of Fame voters to get in. But, like I said, telephone game, who knows what's going on. But that's going to be it. Don't want to get anybody in trouble with that conversation, so I left all the names out. Thanks for listening to Training Camp Journal with Ren. You can follow me on Twitter at Ren Daxt. I'm always down to talk Buccaneers football, and I like to remind all the listeners, this pod falls under the PeterCast podcast family. We also have at Talking Knox, which will be live immediately following the first episode of Hard Knocks. First episode of Hard Knocks, which will be premiering on HBO tomorrow. I'm recording this Monday. It's about 3 o'clock. We'll see when it gets out to you, but there'll be a bunch of tweeting tomorrow on my account, on the PeterCast account, on Brent Allen's account, and we also have a Talking Knox Twitter account. So we'll be out to look for it. Immediately following HBO's Hard Knocks, we're going to go live on Mixler. Brent and I will start talking. We'll have an open phone line. You guys call in, talk about what you saw, what you like, what you don't like, what storylines you wish you thought you wanted to see, or wish you could see, and maybe they'll come later, or storylines that came out that you didn't like. So, we'll just be talking Knocks, and we're sort of aiming at around an hour, but as long as, we get phone calls and good conversation, we'll keep going. No problem. If you're not familiar with our, sort of our mother podcast, 2.5 hours, 3 hours is sort of the norm for us. Thank God we don't have to do that like 3 times a week. So with that, signing off, it sounds like I'll be able to get members exclusive passes as well for the practice tomorrow, Tuesday. And so I will let you know on Twitter when that becomes sort of set in stone. But as far as I know, it's looking really good that I'll be doing one of these things tomorrow because I'll get to go to the members only practice. So until then, you know how to say, go Bucs.